Okay, now we're official.
Okay, so I'll start over. Thank you everyone for joining this. And I don't know what number it is, but joining today's meeting of the San Diego Community Power Community Advisory Committee's meeting. Sebastian, would you like to take roll?
Yes. And excuse me. Carolyn Scofield.
Present.
Larry Emerson.
Here.
Aida Castañeda.
Here.
Victoria Abrenica.
Here.
Tom Summers.
Here.
Let's see here. Secretary Webb.
Here.
Vice Chair Hammond.
Here.
And Chair Price.
Present.
Did I miss anyone? The group is larger, so Matt, did I miss you?
I'm here.
Okay. Let me do a quick count. So,
David Harris let Rita and myself know that he's unable to make it today.
okay, and then Ed Lopez, as well as Peter Anderson, can't join us today. And then Gary Johns, he will be joining us. Oh, there's Jen. Panelist. Okay. Hey, Jen.
Hello.
Hey, count you as present. So we have a quorum chair.
Okay,
And
thank you. Do we have any comments from the public?
let me double check. Last time I did, we didn't. We have no written public comments, and for anyone in the attendee room, if you want to make a public comment, you can raise your hand if you're joining us via computer, or you can press *9 if you're calling via a telephone.
This is Larry Emerson. I'd like to just make a general comment. And today is 3/11, and everybody knows what 9/11 is. But 3/11 was when they had that 9.0 earthquake off the coast of Japan, and it knocked out a nuclear power plant. And this is the 11th year since that happened, and 10 or 20,000 people died. But the key point is our systems, our electric grid needs to be resilient. So as we develop our system, we need to keep that in mind as climate change and different things are affecting our electric grid. So that's my comment today. And 3/11 lives in memory for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment?
We have no more public comment, Chair Price.
Are there any items to be withdrawn or reordered on the agenda? I'm assuming not. With that, we can go to the regular agenda.
If I may interject, Chair Price, I did out of order, so excuse me on that part. Just wanted to welcome our new CAC members. We have 3 of them here today, but if you may give them each an opportunity just to say a few words about themselves.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Perfect. So here, Peter's not here yet, but Victoria, if you would like to just say a few things about yourself, that would be great.
Hello, my name is Victoria Brenica. I live in Spring Valley, which is one of our county's environmental justice communities. I'm currently working as an educator. I serve on my community's Parks and Rec board and my planning group, and I'm just trying to give my community as many resources as possible. And I'm honored to be on this board with you all.
Sebastian, is there any way we can see what they look like?
Yeah, Victoria's here. Let me.
Oh, okay, I see her. I see her.
Try to
Okay. Hi, Victoria.
Perfect. And Victoria, excuse me, Chair Price. Victoria, did you say if you're with the county or national city, just for everybody
Oh,
to
with
know?
the county.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
All righty. Aida, I think you're next.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Aida Castañeda. I am born and raised in Barrio Logan, but I currently reside with my family in a multi-generational household in National City. I'm very excited to be here. I serve on a couple other boards for nonprofits. I sit on the board for Barrio Station. Many of you may remember our civil rights leaders throughout San Diego County, and Rachel Ortiz has been a mentor for me over the years. So I'm looking forward to working with local organizations and empower them to understand the structure. My day job, I am a political consultant. I do a lot of work up and down the state, currently working on a statewide referendum. So I'm very excited about working with you all. We're headed to a new chapter. So I'm really excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you and welcome. And Lawrence?
Yes, Lawrence or Larry Emerson. I live in National City. Came here when I was in 6th grade, when my dad retired from the military. Went through all the local schools. Just had my 50th high school reunion this last year from Sweetwater. My background is civil engineering, and I went overseas to Japan and Southeast Asia. That's why I'm familiar with what happened on 3/11. I was there more than 10 years. And now I came back and worked with Caltrans as a transportation engineer for more than 20 years and retired a few years ago. My hobbies are electric vehicles, and that's why I'm paying keen attention to the grid and where our electricity comes from.
Well, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Now we can move on to the regular scheduled agenda. So do we have a update on community power plan?
Yes, Chair Price, and for this item, my colleagues Colin Santulli and Nelson Lamelli will be leading this presentation.
Good afternoon, committee. Before I get started on this item, I want to give Colin the opportunity to introduce himself.
Thank you, Nelson. Very happy to be here, everyone. I'm Colin Santulli, the new Director of Programs here at Sdcp. So Larry, Aida, Victoria, we're all new in this together, and I share your enthusiasm on the shift that we're seeing here, and I'm happy to be a part of it alongside you all. I'm really happy to be working with Nelson and Sebastian and Rita and Laura and the rest of the team at Sdcp. Real quickly, my background, I came from the city of San Diego, where I worked about 3 years in the sustainability team on transportation electrification and building electrification and generally climate equity and justice efforts that the city was trying to implement there. I also spent some time at SANDAG, our regional planning agency. And then prior to that, I was at the Center for Sustainable Energy, which is a local nonprofit that implements clean energy programs for utilities and state agencies. So very happy to be here, and I'm not going to take too much time. Nelson's going to go deep on the community power plan, but happy to be here, and I'm always available for questions or comments. I can share my contact information in the chat here if we have that function, Sebastian. If not, I'll make sure it gets out to all the advisory committee members.
Thank you and welcome, Colin.
Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Nelson?
Great, thank you. So I wanted to take this time to provide you all with an update on where we are currently at in regards to the community power plan, and also request that the committee extend the appointments of the 2 current committee members to join the project team as we get closer to actually starting this project. So Sebastian, if you want to go to the next slide, I want to start with a little bit of history for our new members and also just kind of remind the committee of where we're at. So the community power plan really came to be late last year, and it was this idea of putting together a document that would kind of lay out the foundation and lay out the ideas and strategies that the program team can utilize as we look forward to implementing programs once we go from this enrollment phase into operational phase. And so the idea was that we wanted to engage the community. We wanted to talk with members of the community and look at all the possibility of programs and start to organize that, all of those ideas, all of those everything we're hearing, those priorities, and start to organize them into a plan, to a document that then we can then use on a 5-year horizon and get a good idea of what programs we need to implement when and where. And I will talk a little bit more about that, the specific scope of work later on. But in November of last year, Calpine Energy Solutions, who is one of our contractors that handles the billing, the data management and billing side of Sdcp, they issued on behalf of us a RFP for a community needs assessment and ultimately this document, the community power plan. And the plan as it was envisioned, the RFP as it's envisioned, was really following on the footsteps of 2 other CCAs, one in LA, Clean Power Alliance, and another up north in Northern California, East Bay Community Energy, which had done very similar things with their CCAs. So in November, that RFP was issued. In December, Calpine received 4 RFP responses, and then we came to the committee at the December meeting and asked the committee to appoint 2 committee members, Carolyn Schofield and committee member Matt Vasilikas. Sorry if I butcher your name, Matt, to kind of assist us in reviewing the RFP, scoring them, and then interviewing the consultants so that we had involvement from the committee as well and would help us in this process. So staff, along with the CAC members and Calpine, we all did that work of reviewing, scoring, and interviewing the firms. We interviewed 3 firms, even though we received 4 responses, because one of the responses was just not what we were looking for. And we did that over the course of the last couple of months. And so at the recommendation of the team, we have decided to move forward with one firm to start to finalize the scope of work, and then have Calpine start to work with them on finalizing the contract. So unfortunately, I wish I could release the name of the firm right now, but because Calpine is still in active contract negotiations with them, we're not at liberty to disclose it. But as soon as we get that, we will let the firm know. What I can say is that this firm has worked with other CCAs to prepare very similar plans for them. They have worked with the county to help them with their update to their climate action plan. So they are very familiar with this type of work and with our region. So we feel very comfortable moving forward with that. I will also note that I want to give Carolyn and Matt an opportunity to kind of provide an update from their perspective towards the end, just after I've kind of talked about how we've been working this scope of work. So if you go to the next slide, Sebastian. So this is really a high-level overview of how we envision this plan coming together, and it's a very simplified view of all the different tasks and engagement pieces that need to come together. But as you can see, the bulk of our work really is this community needs assessment. And so what this community needs assessment is going out and engaging with the community to figure out how we as an organization can help meet the needs of the community at large when it comes to energy or programs or environmentalism or climate, any of those kinds of topics. So that's really the big piece and the big lift here. Separately, the the firm is going to be looking at doing a market assessment of all the existing programs, who are the players out there, what programs are maybe not working but could be enhanced. So kind of just looking largely at the program landscape so that we can get an idea of the universe of programs that exist. And so from the community needs assessment and from working with the CAC and the public and staff and the organization, we want to develop this program prioritization framework, of which we will assess all this universe of programs to then start to filter it and take this large thing and cone it down into a concise list, a more narrow list that we can start to analyze and start to rank programs. So that's why you see program ranking here, of ones that align with the priorities of our community, with the priorities of the organization, with the goals we have set out, with the goals of our member agencies as well. And ultimately, this will feed into this plan that will also lay out this foundation, but talk about the process, talk about who we engage. So it's, you know, it's a larger plan that we will put together. And so I'll get more into the specifics later on, but I just kind of wanted to show you this overview. So if we go to the next slide, Sebastian. So I think that, as I mentioned, the biggest piece there that you saw in that flow chart was really this community needs assessment. That's really phase one of this project. And there's a lot of stakeholder engagement that will be need to be done in order to make this as successful as possible. And the way we're looking at this is really in like a two-step approach. And I've outlined here just some of the work that we are thinking about in terms of engagement strategies, but really what it comes down to is we want to do the information gathering so that we can hear from the different communities and understand what their priorities, what their barriers, what they're facing, that's some of the challenges, like what they think about energy and climate, etc. And then do that kind of work using these public listening sessions and then these interviews with interest groups. And the interest groups are an interesting way for us to go at and talking with various organizations and other populations that populations of people that are already specifically gathered around one specific focus. So like, for example, if we wanted to engage like tenants, we would look for a tenants association or a tenants group so that we can understand what are the challenges that tenants are facing with regards to energy and climate. And so all of this listening sessions and all of these interviews and this community survey that we're planning to put together will feed into this information gathering. Once we have that information, we would then want to go back to the community and say, okay, this is what we heard from you. Are we out of bounds here? Or is there something that we're not capturing correctly? And we want to do that through these community goal setting workshops. And so these workshops, we're going to be offering 2 of them, which are going to be at distinct times and different dates, so that we can get as much cross section of people coming back and be like, yeah, you know, actually I meant to say this thing versus that. Additionally, we want to make sure that we are including you all throughout this process. So in addition to like asking for your help in getting connected with groups, making sure that we're talking to the right people, we actually want to have a goal setting workshop with you all as a way to make sure that we're capturing what you're hearing in your communities, and also as representatives of the organization, tell us what goals and priorities we should be exploring. We also want to do that with member agency staff, because we don't want to forget about our member agencies, and also do that with our board. So really there's this information gathering and then this ground truthing phase that we want to undertake. And the reason we're going through all of this work is that ultimately this all will feed into this program prioritization framework. So we want to make sure that we establish the right priorities, of which then we will take all of the programs that we learn about in the next phase. Sebastian, if you want to go to the next one, which is a market assessment. So we take, do this whole market assessment research and then feed that through the program framework so that we know which programs to explore further. The market assessment is at a high level, it's going to be looking at all of the existing programs and not just like what types of programs, but also looking at identifying the best practices in delivering those programs. So, it's one thing to say, here's a program, and then have a terrible delivery because no one can actually access it or the application's too complicated. We want to make sure that we're utilizing, looking at it from the perspective of a customer going through this process. And also analyzing the gaps in existing program offerings and where maybe we can step in. This policy and funding context that you see here, it's really looking at, there's a lot of money coming down from the state and the federal level. And so the funding context is more of us looking at it and be like, okay, this money is coming down in 2024, this money is coming down in 2025. Maybe if we postpone this program for that, so we can capture that funding, it makes sense, right? So there's a lot of play here. Sebastian, if you go to the next slide. All of this ultimately, like I said, feeds into this program ranking. And so what we're doing is taking this universe of programs, narrowing down to 20 or so that we can then explore and apply these different key metrics, these different KPIs on this, and then establish a priority order for implementation. And again, looking at that funding context is very important so that we know where we can get some funding. So as you can see in the graphic that I developed with my amazing photoshopping skills, it's really just taking these programs ideas that we learn throughout this process and then start to organize them in a way, say like, okay, this program idea needs to be implemented sooner rather than later. This one can leverage this funding, so it's top priority, but maybe short in the longer term. And this will really be a way for us to develop a phasing of programs so that we have a well-rounded portfolio and can advise on program implementation. And if we go to the next slide, Sebastian, ultimately, like I said, all of this culminates in this plan. And you can see another example of my excellent photoshopping skills here. This is not what it's going to look like ultimately. If it does, I think I failed. But what this is develop like a formal public-facing document that our board can adopt. But before we get to that phase of like the board adopting, we actually want to take a step and ground truth what we're hearing, get feedback on this, and then on the first draft of this plan, it's actually presented back to our stakeholders, presented back to the community and be like, hey, does this plan look okay? Is this what we heard from you? Where may have things changed slightly? And so we want to present it back to the stakeholders. We want to bring it back to you, the committee, to solicit feedback, and then actually open up a 30-day comment period where we can receive written feedback so that we can incorporate that into the final plan. Once that's done, really what the board will adopt is this plan that lays out the opportunities for addressing community needs. What are some of the priorities? Who do we partner with? That's important. Who do we need to consider during stakeholder engagement? And then also just gives a list of the initial 5-year program suite so that we have a well-rounded portfolio of programs. Ultimately, the plan is going to be translated into Spanish and Tagalog when the board adopts this. And so that's kind of the overview of a really quick high-level overview of what we plan, of what the scope of work is currently. And so we want to make sure that we come back to you, give you an update this, but also solicit feedback and just listen to you all. But before I get there, I want to go to the next slide, Sebastian. Just kind of remind you of how all of these pieces come together, and then allow Carolyn and Matt an opportunity to kind of provide their feedback in terms of like their engagement with this piece and what they think about this.
Matthew?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Nelson and Colin, for this presentation and sharing more information on the community power plan. I guess I'll just kind of set the table at a very high level and say that, with regards to climate action in our region, the foundation needs to be affordable, accessible, and abundant renewable energy. And so Sandiego Community Power and community choice energy programs are going to be what gets us to that future. And this community power plan will be the foundation for Sdcp to provide that. So this is an absolutely critical document, and I'm really excited by how much time Nelson and Colin have spent understanding how much community input is necessary for it, so that we can get the right roadmap for us to get to that 100% clean energy future for everyone. So, I think at this point, it's really important for us to, track this document very closely, its development, encourage our community members and key stakeholders in our respective jurisdictions to, be part of this process, because again, at the end of the day, when it comes to transportation decarbonization, building decarbonization, our land use strategies, all of that is going to be dependent on having affordable, accessible, and abundant renewable energy. So, and then with regards to my participation in this project thus far, it's been to help with reviewing the applications for the community power plan consultants, interviewing those applicants, and providing a recommendation in terms of who to bring on. And I think once Calpine finalizes and negotiates this contract, we're going to have a great partner to go out into the community and to provide a real tool and roadmap for us to move forward with our shared objectives and goals. So happy to talk to anyone offline anytime, and just share more thoughts on this. I've been involved in this since before Sdcp was created, and again, just thank you, Nelson and Colin, and the rest of Sdcp staff for advancing this very important document.
Thank you, Matthew. Carolyn?
Hey. So I want to say thank you as well, and I really appreciate the graphic too, because I read plans, and one thing I have to say is that I read a lot of different plans, and it was really helpful to me in being able to identify things that I thought were important for our plan. And I also wanted to make a comment that when we share this with the public, to me, the real value of this is demonstrating that Sandiego Community Power is a nonprofit organization. And I think that's really a big deal. And so I'm really excited, especially for that aspect of the plan. And so it's also, I wanted to just comment that it is based on our JPA agreement. And so I've gotten a lot more acquainted with many different parts of the JPA. And I think that's really important as far as Matt's comments about affordable and accessible for what we're an abundant energy and projects that we want to do. I was especially interested in stakeholders, and I am really happy to see the 20 meetings that have to do with the survey, where people will be meeting in person. I think that anytime we meet, it's a really big opportunity to clarify and encourage and support Sandiego Community Power. And so that was my primary input, and I'm really happy to move forward and work, continue to work on this plan. And I'm really grateful for all the work that the staff has done and all the pages that I read. I think this PowerPoint and presentation is an excellent summary of exactly what we're moving towards. So I really want to thank the staff and everyone for all the work that's been done. Thank you.
So Sebastian, if we can go to the next slide. This is the last one. So this is the action item that is in addition to the update on the community power plan, scope of work, and where we stand. One of the things is we wanted to ask the committee to extend the appointments from the CAC to join the project team. And I want to let Colin talk a little bit about where the request is coming from, because I think it will be incredibly valuable to have the CAC help us out.
Yeah, so I think, I can't remember if we did already, but a big thanks to Matt and Carolyn for your participation. I know everyone volunteers their time, but when you accepted the appointments to be involved in the procurement process, you accepted more of your volunteer time being given to the organization. So it's easy for staff here to kind of get our head down and potentially lose sight of bigger picture. And that's one of the key roles of the advisory committee, in addition to being the voice for your communities, is to help us keep us big picture. So it's really helpful through that procurement process. And I think that because of that, we wanted to, like Nelson said, think about how we could continue your involvement in the actual project of developing the CPP, which will be about a 9-month process. We're thinking it could be a little less. We're still working on the exact schedule. But that's the request here to the advisory committee, is to extend that involvement, because it really was invaluable. And we want this to be the advisory committee's document as much as staff's. We want the community power plan to be truly representative of the needs of the community. And so continuing with 2 advisory committee members being involved in the development, we thought that made the most sense. I've taken similar approaches in other projects, and I think it helps a lot to have that active voice, as opposed to us bringing back documents to the advisory committee just to chime in on finished products. We'd rather have you all in the driver's seat with us along the way.
Well, thank you. I have something to say. I don't know if this is an appropriate time to say that, but I've never been one for appropriate times. As we're reaching out and doing this outreach to stakeholders, I think it's important for us to understand and recognize that we're not just reaching out to the current, I call them choir members, that are interested in this, right? A stakeholder in San Diego community power, in my humble opinion, is anybody that has a light switch and gets a bill, right? And we need to, and that will force us to kind of increase the size of the choir when we're having these stakeholder meetings. So it's not just the regular environmental people or the regular energy entities, but other entities that come to the table, because we have to let them understand that they're stakeholders in this too. And the community programs that we're talking about possibly creating will benefit more than just energy, because there's economics associated with this, and economics in communities of concern is always an issue. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we have to look at this a little bit differently. Some of us on this call may understand what I'm talking about, because we're stakeholders and we're always being asked the same questions. And so this is another example of asking questions to the community. One question I did have, though, is that when is the advertising for the stakeholders, right? Which I've just expanded to name stakeholders to include everybody with a light switch and gets a bill, right? Will this information or request for involvement in this like go out in a bill, right? And say, there are certain meetings, or hypothetically, if you live in National City, there's a National City email where people can send information to, if you're in the city of San Diego, so that we personally don't start getting this information, but it's starting to be tracked and they can be contacted via whatever part of the region that they're in, so that we can actually take our outreach, or the outreach could be done at a whole nother level from a paradigm shift perspective. I think that's it.
Would you like me to respond to that, Chair?
Yes, please. And then Ada has a question.
Okay. Yeah. So let me start with saying, I hear you on that stakeholder, and not making sure that we're not soliciting feedback from the same voices, but actually getting expanding what the definition is of stakeholders. And that is something that we have been approaching it very strategically with our consultant, and as we develop the scope of work, is making sure that we hear from more than the usual voices. In regards to your question about whether this will be like an announcement of this will be included in like the bill or something like that, we're not thinking that that would be the case, not because we just haven't thought about that, but more because the amount of space that we get on the bill to promote anything is incredibly limited, and it takes SDG&E months to actually implement. So we're thinking that there are probably better strategies that we can implement besides using the bill. So I like your strategy about emailing and working with the city staff, working with member agencies. So that is all definitely on the table in terms of the strategies we are getting out to promote this, these listening sessions, but also these community surveys. So definitely going to be leveraging your networks. We're going to be leveraging the community-based organization networks, leveraging the member agency networks, as well as what I like to call like trusted ambassadors. So, you know, there are certain people within our community that are just like, if you have an issue, like you talk to that person, they know exactly who to connect you with, right? So trying to get connected with those trusted ambassadors to also help us spread the word about this so that we are getting a cross section of our service territory, not just the same voices.
Okay, I got one statement to that. I sometimes we get caught up trying to hustle from the bottom up, right? And hopefully nobody's offended by this word hustler, but I hustle from the top down, right? I go as high as possible so that the information filters down, right? And it doesn't filter up to the leadership, it filters down from the leadership. So, you know, that may be something to keep in mind as we're looking at engaging different stakeholders, whether it's the you know, La Raza or the NAACP or, you know, whoever, to get that level of leadership involved in this conversation as a stakeholder, I think will be very beneficial as we roll this out. Ada?
Yes, I really appreciate that, Chair Price, because the reality is that it's often our most disenfranchised communities that don't get a lot of this information. So it is critical that we're holistic about the approach. So I echo a lot of the same sentiments that you're describing, Mr. Price, and I think the best way that we can also combat this is not often have to reinvent the wheel, but also work with organizations that are already doing that. And when I think about that, I think of promotoras, right? There's a group of promotoras up and down San Diego County that do a lot of this work already, and they hit the pavement and they discuss these topics to their neighbors. So there's a lot of organizations that have a civil rights or they have a community of color component and the equity component that we really want to be able to champion. And I look forward to doing that with anybody who has the conviction to do so, because we have to be sure that we're meeting that equity piece head on. So I think we can work on tackling that together. And there's a lot of organizations that would be happy to. The Chicano Federation is also a great entity that I'm sure would be intrigued about having these conversations. So yeah, we can totally talk to all of them and find ways to get them better involved.
Thank you. Larry?
Yes, let's see, I have my, yes, ma'am. Yeah, this is Larry Emerson again, and my comment, tried to get San Diego Gas and Electric to put something in a flyer before. I sent an email to their information office and it went around their system, and someone verbally told me, oh, I saw your email. And then it's that they said the tough part is they have to get CARB's approval, or what is it? Or CEC's, the board of approval. And I think if San Diego Community Power is involved with our electricity, we should be able to get a flyer or added to the newsletter that San Diego Gas and Electric sends out the same way. We should be able to go to the top and get something added without having to go through San Diego Gas and Electric, but just get them to print it for us. So just FYI, they were saying the stumbling block was getting approval from the above, the upper state agency. But I think San Diego Community Power should have the same ability to get flyers put in the mailers. And we should check into that.
That concluded this item for us, and we appreciate the feedback, and we look forward to working with you all. And once we get the contract all ironed out, we will be able to be much more forthright about our partners, and we'll be looking to you all to help us make this be successful. So I think we're ready to take a vote.
Victoria?
Oh, thank you. Would we be reaching out during the climate action plan meetings that the county hosts for environmental justice communities to ensure that their voices are also included?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I'm half Mexican, half Filipino, and I really appreciate that the documents are going to be translated in Spanish and Tagalog. But I live really close to Jamul, where a lot of folks speak Arabic. Would that also be a language that could potentially be available?
Yeah, that's something we can definitely explore into the translation service.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Nelson and Colin. Welcome aboard, Aida and Victoria and Peter and Larry. I really do appreciate the AAA approach to this, Matthew and Carolyn. Abundant, affordable, and I forgot the other one, but accessible, of course. And I'm wondering if perhaps right up there with those might be projects that do the greatest good.
It's got to have an A in it, Tom. Tom, it has to have an A in it.
Okay, well, I'm still thinking in terms of the greatest good. And one thing I don't want, I think it's really a unique JPA that we have here, because we have an elephant and a gorilla in the room, as well as a chipmunk. And sometimes the little guys, which I'm representing in Imperial Beach here, we get special treatment, but sometimes we get left out. And so if our approach is to do the greatest good throughout the entire service area, or might have the potential of having some jurisdictional infighting. That would be my concern. So glad to be able to voice that.
Eddie, this is Peter. Add a fourth A, advantageous.
Okay, there you go, Matt. You got to add that to your soliloquy.
Well, my hand's raised, but I'll jump in too then, because
Yeah,
I was
please.
going to say all inclusive.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, and Matthew?
Yeah, I just was wondering if a timeline could be provided at some point, just so that folks know how long the community engagement piece will be and so on and so forth. Maybe not right now, but in the future. Thank you.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Should I ask for public comment? I'm always confused about that. Anybody from public have anything to add to this conversation?
Chair Price, there are no written comments, and there is one hand raised, but I do want to note that Carolyn also has her hand raised.
Okay, let's do Fabi, then we'll come back to Carolyn.
Okay, Fabi, I'm gonna allow you to talk, and you'll have 3 minutes for your public comment.
Okay, are we okay? I'm on my phone, so I'm trying.
Yeah, we
can
hear
hear
you.
you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Fabi Lau, Senior Equity Policy Manager with the Center for Sustainable Energy. I just wanted to thank staff for this update, and it's great to see that it's progressing, that we're almost there on finalizing and landing on the candidate to help this work happen, that it's going to be so great for the community. And I was just wondering, maybe I missed it, but for that one slide that, with the flow chart that include like all the pieces together, is there, did Nelson mention about how long staff thinks all of this work is going to take, like to basically bring it to the board adoption. And that was just like a question, but otherwise, thank you so much for all this work, and I can't wait to see the community engagement process started.
Thank you, Fabi.
Chair, would you like me to respond to that?
Quickly, very quickly, sir.
Yeah, so the time frame that we're anticipating for this is about 9 months for completion. And so to Matt's point earlier, we'll bring back a timeline of when the work is going to be done once we have that finalized.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn?
I just wanted to add that originally we talked about possibly having a standing agenda item when we were meeting with the team, but we didn't bring that forth today. But maybe that could be something for our next meeting, because what I would anticipate happening is not just Matt and I sharing with all of you, but also capturing all of your experiences and comments, which is what I'm also working on today, to make sure that those get back to the team. And so I just wanted to comment about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're a standing agenda item that speaks to this community power plan update, and that you and or Matthew would facilitate that once a month, or be responsible for it being facilitated? That makes sense?
I think that's what we're looking at.
And I think we could probably vote on that next month as an action item. And if there's not any more comments, I think we could vote on extending the appointments for Carolyn and Matthew to join the CPP project team. All in favor?
Excuse me, Chair Price.
Yeah, Matt, I'm sorry, you're supposed to do that. I'm sorry, I'm trying to run too much. I'm sorry. Do your thing. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I like the efficiency, but because we are virtual, I do have to do a roll call vote. But before I do that, Carolyn, I see your hand is still raised. I'm not sure if that's from before. Okay, just taken down. And then I do want to recognize that Gary Johns has joined us, as well as Peter Anderson. Peter, when I call you for your vote, if you don't mind doing a quick intro of yourself, we did that at the beginning of the meeting. And then David Harris is here, but he did let me know that he's driving, so I will not be calling on him for a vote, since he instructed me not to do so. So
very quickly, Sebastian, I just want to note, sorry to jump in. We do need a motion and a second before the vote.
Thank you, Nick.
So moved.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Motion is to extend the appointments of Matthew and Carolyn to join the CPP project team.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Sebastian, can you call for the vote? Nick, are we cool? Is that okay? We good? Okay.
Yes.
Cool. All right. Peter Anderson.
This is Peter Anderson. I was asked to do a short introduction. My apologies for being late. I was on a settlement call on our lawsuit against the County Climate Action Plan, which is certainly relevant to this group, but important in and of itself. I'm Dr. Peter Anderson. I'm a former professor from San Diego State. I'm an officer of Sierra Club. I'm the immediate past chairperson of Sierra Club, and now I'm on the legal committee and the conservation committee of Sierra Club. And I'm very happy to join you. Sierra Club has been pushing for community choice aggregation for many years, and it's very exciting to see it come to fruition. I vote aye.
Thank you, Peter. And Peter comes to us from the county. Next up, Carolyn Schofield.
Yes.
Matthew Basilakis.
Aye.
Tom Summers.
Summers, yes.
Victoria Abrenica.
Aye.
Jen Dirks.
Aye.
Perfect. Larry Emerson.
I would say aye, but I'm going to ask Matt and Carolyn if they get together to go over this stuff, or if there's a way I can join them when they are reviewing. I wouldn't mind participating in their efforts.
Matthew gave a thumbs up. Carolyn, how you feel about that?
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, I guess they would reach out to you, Larry, or you'll reach out to them and coordinate that. Continue, Sebastian, please.
Thank you. Aida Castañeda.
Aye.
Gary Johns.
Aye.
Secretary Webb.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hammond.
Aye.
And Chair Price.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Carolyn and Matthew, for doing this. Moving on, we're to receive Brown Act training presentation from Best and Krieger.
Thank you, Chair Price. And for this presentation, Nick will be taking over. He has some slides he will be sharing.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nick Norvell. I'm an attorney at Best and Krieger. We are general counsel to Sdcp. I serve as assistant general counsel to the agency. And I'm going to be going over a training on the Brown Act, which applies to you as a legislative body of Sdcp. So we want to make sure that everyone is up to speed on what the Brown Act's general requirements are and how it applies to you as a legislative body. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move through things fairly quickly, but I'll jump right in here. So we'll talk about the purpose of the Brown Act, how it applies, what a serial meeting is. That's something it's a prohibited concept under the Brown Act. Rules governing meetings, what happens when there are violations, and then what are the rules for the Brown Act under COVID-19. So the purpose of the Brown Act is to ensure that almost all aspects of the decision-making process of legislative bodies are conducted in public and open to public scrutiny. Essentially, the idea is that the public should be able to watch the dialogue and the sharing of information with legislative body members and watch their discussions and decision-making process at an open and notice meeting where the public has the ability to attend, has the ability to provide public comment, and to observe when actions are taken. There are certain exceptions, of course, for items like closed session, for certain matters like litigation, certain types of employment matters, real estate negotiations, those types of things. But generally, everything aside from those has to be conducted in an open and public meeting. And I do just want to briefly note, you do have a slide deck that was provided to you in the agenda materials. In the interest of time, I've removed some of those slides that are not as directly applicable to the CAC, but if you're interested in learning more, those slides are there. And if you have any follow-up questions, let staff know, and I'm happy to provide more information on those subjects. So who does the Brown Act apply to? It applies to meetings of legislative bodies of local agencies. Local agencies are basically anything that you would normally think of as being a local government body. It could be a city, a county, a town, a school district, any other board or commission of those types of agencies, and includes joint powers agencies like Sdcp. And it also in legislative body includes not only the main governing body like the board of directors of Sdcp, but it also includes boards, commissions, and committees that are created by a formal action of the governing body. And CAC is one of those types of committees. And in certain situations, the Brown Act can even apply to private organizations. Those are very limited circumstances, and there always has to be some sort of public component to it, but they can apply in those very limited situations. The key to the Brown Act, as I talked about, and its purpose is that all meetings should be open and public, except when the Brown Act authorizes otherwise. So what is a meeting and what is not a meeting under the Brown Act? A meeting is any gathering of a majority of the members of the legislative body at the same time and place, even sort of electronically or virtually, to hear, discuss, or deliberate on any matter within their jurisdiction. It doesn't require that action be taken by the body for a meeting to occur. Essentially, it's that gathering and discussing or hearing about something within the jurisdiction that triggers the concept of a meeting. And that can include conversations, sharing of comments or questions, a collective exchange of facts, or a collective briefing. All of those types of things among members of the legislative body can be considered a meeting. So let's talk about what a meeting is not. The Brown Act contains specific exceptions for certain types of activities that would kind of maybe tend to fall in that general definition that we just talked about, but it calls out specific exceptions for things that are not meetings. Those include individual contacts that include less than a quorum. So one of you as a member can talk to another member about a particular item, even an agenda item that's going to be on the meeting. It just can't involve a majority of you. Or a quorum of the body. So that's just important to keep in mind. Sometimes some agencies, particularly if there are 5 members, the members will have what they call like a Brown Act buddy, and it's their sort of one designated person that they talk to agenda items about beforehand. That's totally fine under the Brown Act. It just can't, those discussions can't ever involve a majority, even through a series of communications. So individual contacts is fine. Attendance at conference and seminars that are open to the public together that include a majority are also fine, as long as the legislative body isn't getting together and discussing items within their jurisdiction as part of that conference or seminar. Community meetings are also fine, again, as long as the majority is not using them as an opportunity to discuss items within its jurisdiction. Purely social or ceremonial occasions are okay. Attendance at standing committee meetings that exist within the agency, and then meetings of other legislative bodies. A majority of the body can attend as long as they don't discuss amongst themselves issues related to the agency. So for example, if a majority of the CAC went and attended in person at a Sdcp board of directors meeting, that attendance is completely fine. The CAC just can't gather in a corner, for example, and talk about something that it's on its own agenda, those types of things. So these are all pretty common sense exceptions. One of the things that is expressly prohibited under the Brown Act is serial meetings. And a serial meeting is the use of direct communications or intermediaries or technology by a majority of the legislative body in order to develop a collective concurrence so as for action to be taken on an item, it's prohibited for action to be taken using those means. So to use intermediaries or direct communication or technology to have that discussion amongst one another, even through any of those means, is prohibited under the Brown Act. So serial meetings can happen in a number of different ways. It can happen as just personal meetings. If 5 people got together, or I'm sorry, in this case, it would be more than 7 of you got together and talked, that could be a violation in a serial meeting. Or if it was a meeting of 4 of you and then one of those people went and talked to a meeting of 3 of you, that could be a serial meeting. They can happen by telephone, by email, particularly reply all emails. That's something to be cautious of. Written correspondence, the use of intermediaries, social networking sites such as Facebook or Twitter. And that's something that I want to particularly talk about is recent legislation that was approved in, I believe it was approved in 2020. It was effective in January of 2021. And it clarified the rules of social media as they relate to the Brown Act and how members of a legislative body interact with one another. So under SB 992, which went into effect last year, members of a legislative body cannot discuss the business of the agency with a majority of members within the same legislative body, including comments, posting, sharing, commenting, using digital icons. This even includes likes. So be cautious about that, those types of communications. And then the Brown Act and SB 992 actually went a step further in addition to saying that a majority can't get together and use these types of communications on social media to discuss items within the agency's business. It also said that members of a legislative body cannot respond directly to another member's communication or comment or post if the two are on the same legislative body and the topic is the agency's business. It's fine if you interact with one another on personal matters, on matters that don't relate to Sdcp, but this basically means that when one member of the legislative body posts an item related to Sdcp and the CAC's jurisdiction, the members of the legislative body cannot interact with one another on that topic. Even though it doesn't yet involve a majority, the legislature created this rule basically to make sure that social media couldn't be used as a way of sort of developing a concurrence or developing a sense of the feelings of members of the legislative body using social media. So on serial meetings, one of the things that we talked about was the use of intermediaries or other types of communication for them to happen. There are kind of two ways that serial meetings can happen: is a chain where one member talks to a second member who talks to a third, et cetera, and it eventually involves a majority that has formed a collective concurrence or has an understanding about how they're going to vote or approach a particular topic. The other way a serial meeting can happen is hub and spoke, where there's some sort of intermediary or multiple intermediaries where they're relaying information back and forth among the members of the legislative body and essentially using those intermediaries to sort of come to a collective concurrence on a subject that's within the agency's jurisdiction. So serial meeting exceptions, while the Brown Act prohibits serial meetings, it explicitly says that one-on-one communications by a non-member of the legislative body, like a staff member of the agency, with members of the legislative body is okay. However, staff members in this example cannot share their views or comments or concerns with different members. So for example, if you have a question on an upcoming CAC agenda item and reach out to Sdcp staff, they can talk to you about that, and they can even talk to a second or third or fourth member about their individual questions. They just can't relay the members' individual questions amongst the others so as to sort of create a majority understanding regarding that upcoming item. Some just quick tips, if in case there's ever an email sent out that you are not BCC'd on, please refrain from using reply all. It's one of the easiest ways that a serial meeting can happen. So just an important tip to remember. Ensure that individual emails don't get forwarded or become a serial meeting. And then just use caution to ensure compliance with these rules in the Brown Act. One of the other items I wanted to talk about are the rules for meetings and what the Brown Act requires in terms of how the public becomes aware of what's going to be on an agenda. So regular meetings of a legislative body, the agenda has to be posted at least 72 hours before the meeting. It has to include the time and place of the meeting, and it must include a brief general description of each item discussed or addressed, as well as an opportunity for the public to provide comment on non-agenda items. Another type of meeting that can occur is a special meeting. A special meeting is basically just any meeting that occurs outside of the regular meeting schedule. And agendas for those can be posted up to 24 hours before the meeting. It has to include the time and location for the meeting, and it must also include a brief general description of each item to be discussed or addressed, so the public knows what's going to be considered at that meeting. In addition to posting the agenda, the agency must also make the agenda packet available to the public when the materials are distributed to all or majority all of the legislative body. So if there's an email that goes out that attaches the agenda packet and sends it to all of you as members of the legislative body, the agenda packet also has to be available to the public at the same time. As mentioned earlier, the public has a right to comment at every regular meeting on any item under the jurisdiction of the body, whether it's on the agenda or not. For agenda items, the public must be given an opportunity to comment before or during the body's consideration of the item. There's a little flexibility of when public comment can take place. It could be before staff speaks or after staff speaks, but it always has to be before the body takes any action on the item. So that's the rule in terms of timing, is just to make sure there's always the opportunity for public comment before any action is taken. And then at special meetings, members have the right to address the body about any item that's listed on the agenda. The general rule is that no items, there can be no discussion or action on items that are not included on the agenda. Now, there are a few narrow exceptions to this rule that I'll go over now, but that is the general rule, that if something is not on the agenda, the legislative body cannot discuss it and certainly cannot act on it. That said, for items not on the agenda, the following few narrow exceptions are okay. Those are brief responses to statements or questions from the public, questions to staff for clarification on matters based upon public comments. Again, they have to be brief and not an extended discussion. Brief announcements or reports on a member's or staff's activities, providing references or information to staff, and asking staff to report back at a future meeting. Again, in none of these cases can they result in an extended discussion amongst the legislative body. And the safest approach always is if the body wants to have a longer discussion on something, or it seems like something important, let's say that a staff member raised as part of one of their reports, but it's not on the agenda, the safest way to go about it is to place it, have it placed on a future agenda. So there can be the large discussion of the item. I want to briefly just talk about what happens when the Brown Act is violated. When there is a violation of Brown Act and someone pursues it in court, the court can enjoin or invalidate the action, and they can also mandate correction. The court can require that the legislative body undertake certain practices to ensure that similar types of Brown Act violations don't occur in the future. And then I do also want to note that court costs and attorney's fees are also recoverable. So if an SDCP legislative body were found in violation of the Brown Act, it could result in payment not only of SDCP's court costs and attorney fees, but those of the plaintiff as well, if they are successful. And in addition to those civil penalties, individuals who intentionally violate the Brown Act can be guilty of a misdemeanor and criminally prosecuted. And last slide here, and then I'm happy to take questions. The Brown Act has undergone some changes, some temporary and some a little bit longer since COVID-19 hit in 2020. Essentially, meetings like this that are virtual or by teleconference can now take place without listing all of your individual meeting locations or addresses that you're participating from. In the past, teleconference rules required that the locations where you're participating from be listed on the agenda and the public be able to attend from those locations. The governor suspended those provisions during 2020 and most of 2021. And then in the fall of last year, the legislature adopted AB 361, which adopts a lot of those practices on a more going forward basis. Legislative bodies just need to make findings every 30 days in order to continue using these exceptions to allow teleconference meetings when there's a state of emergency and a need for social distancing. And I'll just note that in general, SDCP's board of directors has been making those findings on behalf of itself and all of the legislative bodies, including CAC. So that's why you haven't seen a specific item related to this on the agenda. But the board is continuing to make those findings for the time being based on current COVID circumstances and AB 361. Are there any questions? I see Larry Emerson has his hand raised.
So right now we're all meeting by teleconference, Zoom meetings. In the future, when this we're allowed to meet together, or we will be required to meet together in person, And what if we're carpooling to go to the meeting and we're chatting?
As
What's
long
allowed
as
and what's not allowed?
as long as the carpool does not include a majority of you, which I don't think it would, you'd be fine. And as long as one of you in the carpool hasn't talked to a number that includes a majority when considered as total, you'd be fine.
Sometimes it's very educational to discuss, you know, these things among people and be better prepared when you get to a meeting. So I think that's actually beneficial. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Any questions from the public?
Otherwise, there are no written public comments, and just giving the public a chance to raise their hand. I don't see any items, any hands raised, I mean.
Okay, there's no action required on this. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you,
Appreciate that.
everyone. Thank you, Chair Price.
Yes. If I may just mention, staff will be giving this presentation. We'll be inviting our legal counsel once a year to give everybody a refresher on Brown Act compliance. Obviously, we thought it'd be a perfect opportunity today to have this training with our new CAC members. So just for your reference, we understand this material can be heavy, but it's important to know, and we will have this training at least once a year.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Item number 7, update on CEO recruitment process.
Hi, everyone. We had our executive recruiter here, but unfortunately she had to break off. So she just sent me an update to share with you all. As you know, final interviews took place last Friday, March 4th. We had 2 CAC representatives, Chair Price and Matthew Basilakis, that were able to interview the candidates along with staff members Cody Hubin and Laura Fernandez. We expect an announcement to be made at the March 24th Sdcp board meeting. And other than that, we are obligated to keep things confidential. So that's the most I can report out on the search.
Okay, well, thank you. Are there any questions or concerns from the committee or the public? I can't see anybody, any questions from the public, Sebastian? You're on mute, Sebastian.
Oh my God, that's funny.
I see Larry has his hand up.
Yeah, Larry. Thank you, Rita.
Sure.
Oh, another question. I understand that a consultant took the comments from Matthew and Chair to the board members who are making the decision. Did the consultant, I'm wondering if they wrote down what they relayed to the board members from our CAC members who met with the candidates? If there was a written documentation or it was just all verbal?
I unfortunately wasn't part of the process. Chair Price, do you know how they conveyed that information to the board?
I believe she wrote the information down, and maybe Matthew could share more on that. I know that, you know, it's hard to share what I say or what Matthew says the way we actually say it, but you know, it comes out different on paper. But Matt, maybe you have some more insight into that.
Yeah, no, we concluded the interviews and then we provided feedback to the consultant, and then that feedback was written down, I believe, in bullet point form and shared with the board.
So thank you. I do believe that they understood what we were talking about. Any more hands raised or public comment on this item?
I don't see any more, Chair Price.
Okay, we will move to agenda item number 8, receive an update on phase 3 mass enrollment.
All right, and for this item, I'm sharing the screen now. It will be our Director of Account Services and Data Analytics. Lucas, I forget which one goes first. if it's one or the other, but you can let us know.
No worries. Thanks, Sebastian. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today to present to the CAC updates on our phase 3 mass enrollment that's currently underway, and it has been underway since February, obviously starting with the city of Imperial Beach. Sebastian, do you mind going to the next slide, please? So I'm actually happy to let the members of the CAC know that we have effectively concluded mass enrollment for the city of Imperial Beach, and a total of 9,399 non-net energy metered customers and 47 net energy metering customers were successfully added into our service portfolio as of the end of February, and then an additional 7,129 active NEM accounts with February true up. Again, based on what the board had approved, we are rolling net energy metering customers to coincide with their true up or the end of their true up as part of bundle service, so that we do not inadvertently affect any of the billing mechanics, accrued credits, etc. And so this is the reason why for phase 3 mass enrollment, we're doing it based on member city, starting with Imperial Beach and then concluding with City of San Diego and Chula Vista in May. But mass enrollment will continue at least until through January of 2023, because we have to enroll net energy metered customers on their relevant period or true up month, which obviously started in February, and that for the next 12 months will conclude in January of 2023. So again, very happy to let you all know that mass enrollment so far is going great. And we did commence mass enrollment in the city of La Mesa earlier this month. And I will move over to the next slide. I see a hand raised, so probably I'll defer to Chair Price, but do you want me to go through the presentation in its entirety and then stop and entertain questions and comments then? Or would you like for me to take a pause and address the questions as those arise?
I think we should do it now, and we'll see how that goes. And if that becomes too lengthy, we'll do it at the end. I don't see the hand raised, but
we can address at the end just to make sure he doesn't cover it in his presentation. Thank you, Lucas.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, I'll move over to the next slide, please.
I'm sorry, I have my hand raised too.
Oh, Anna Webb?
Yes, I just wanted to say that, thank you for these numbers. I may be missing something, may seem a bit low for IB. Our population as of 2019 was 27,000 approximately. And I know that fluctuates because we're a transient town with the military, but does this kind of equate to a lot of opt-outs, or is this pretty good in your eyes?
So this is pretty good from the information that we've gotten from the source, which is SCG&E. And I think I will actually articulate some of what we were seeing in terms of the counts, cumulatively speaking, to be enrolled. Again, I think when you look at a population of 27,000, it doesn't necessarily mean that every single person would occupy every single meter, right? You could have 27,000 and 5 of which or 7 of which are in one household.
Right.
Then we don't look at the population, we would look at how many households that have individual meters are actually rolling over to our service. So that's one of the distinctions that I definitely would like to make.
Perfect.
Yeah, so to that point, from a meter perspective, is that how many total meters are there in Imperial Beach, and what is this percentage?
So if you're looking at the meter count, the cumulative eligible meters for Sdcp service in the city of Imperial Beach, it's approximately 9,500. And again, the deltas that you see, those are typically a function of the fact that even as mass enrollment is going on, there are people who are moving in and out, right? There's folks that are essentially saying, oh, I'm actually moving out of town or whatever the case may be, and they're going into other member jurisdictions. You could very well have instances where premises are being closed entirely. And so the counts, and again, these numbers here, I think I created these slides probably late last week, and the numbers, I'm pretty sure if I was to rerun them today, they're not going to look exactly the same, but there should be a very strong correlation. You're not going to say, or you're not going to see a deviation of, let's say, 9,500 meters, and then the next week you see 20,000 meters. It just doesn't work like that.
So what you're saying is there's 95, and this is for me, and I'm kind of slow. There's 9,500 meters, and we've enrolled 9,400 of those.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty good to me.
Yes, and I do want to say I've had conversations with neighbors, just to throw this in for everyone. And I know my bill was down this month, and my neighbors, which had, oh my gosh, was just outrageous. The last couple of months was about $150 less this month. And I know we're talking in 1% to 2%, but her bill was extremely high. So I think people are quite pleased. So I just wanted to say that.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for the comments and the questions. I will move ahead to the next slide, please. So again, we are in the midst of our La Mesa mass enrollment right now that commenced actually on March 5th. The reason being is that, accounts are rolling over to us on their meter read dates, and the earliest meter read in the city of La Mesa was actually read on March 4th based on the published SDG&E meter reading schedule, and that earliest read cycle would actually transition over to us the following day, meaning March 5th. And this is true, and this mass enrollment will go on throughout the remainder of March and a few days into April. And then from there, we will concurrently transition over to the city of Encinitas, and then finally conclude with the city of Chula Vista and San Diego. And as of last week, when I created these slides, a total number or a total count of expected mass enrollment is 22,893 non-NEM in La Mesa, and then about 274 NEM accounts with the true-up month of March in La Mesa. And then for the other customers under net energy metering across all of our other jurisdictions who have a true-up month of March, which correlates to the La Mesa mass enrollment, totals approximately 7,170. So again, by the end of the March mass enrollment, or I should say La Mesa / March NEM true-up mass enrollment, we're expecting closer to around 30,000 more accounts to fold into our service accordingly.
When will the county be enrolled, or the county meters that we have access to be enrolled, and how many of those are there?
That's an excellent question, Chair Price. So for the county and national city, at this point in time, we haven't finalized the mass enrollment schedule yet. But all roads point to that mass enrollment taking place in Q1 or Q1 of 2023. Q2, I should say.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I will be more than glad to return and provide an update when we get those counts and once that plan has been approved, so that the members of the CAC can know exactly what to expect and when. As far as the phase 3 mass enrollment is concerned, Sebastian, if you don't mind going to the next slide, that'll be great. So this here essentially captures, again, this is a snapshot at a point in time. These numbers are constantly in flux. Customers are moving in and out. Accounts are, new accounts are being created, old accounts are being closed down, but this is a point, or rather a snapshot at a point in time. And what you are seeing in front of you is essentially the schedule of our of our statutory pre and post enrollment notices. Again, this is a CPUC requirement. Before we enroll customers as part of mass enrollment, we have to send them 2 pre-enrollment notices 60 days before their accounts roll over to our service, and then 2 post-enrollment notices after their accounts have rolled over to our service. And again, within these statutory notices, customers are provided with information with regards to who Sdcp is, the service that they can expect to receive, when that service will start, and most importantly, the cornerstone of CCA, of community choice aggregation, which is choice, allowing them to essentially know that they can opt out if they choose to. And so here we've already. Sorry, was that a comment or?
No, I was coughing. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks. Hopefully everything is okay over there, Chair Price. In terms of these pre-enrollment notices, so the first one is actually a postcard, and most of our customers in Imperial Beach, in La Mesa, in Encinitas, and San Diego and Chula Vista should have received at least their first pre-enrollment notice. And for the city of San Diego and Chula Vista in particular, the largest mail drop, as you can see in March, almost 600,000 plus notices went out earlier this month. And we have received feedback from staff and from other key stakeholders that those mailers have been received. So this here is just to give you a quick overview of the schedule with which we are mailing these pre and post enrollment schedules. Again, and customers are being given information pertinent to who Sdcp is, when they can expect service to start, as well as the options and channels through which customers can exercise their choice by either staying opted in to our service or electing to opt out. Moving over to the next slide, please. So I think the most important key performance indicator when it comes to what is the impact of of our mass enrollment in terms of how many customers are participating in our service, meaning how many customers are choosing not to opt out versus those that are opting out. This slide here captures that. Again, we are tracking this KPI or key performance indicator broken down by the phases. As most of you know, we have had phase 1 and 2. So our phase 1 was for the municipal accounts. And then for phase 2, it was for all of our non-residential accounts. And that phase essentially took place last June. And what you see in front of you on the left-hand chart, this is actually tracking of our participation rate for phase 1 and 2. How many accounts are actively served? And again, this was as of last week. Obviously, the numbers this week probably have shifted accordingly because constant movement, customers moving in, customers moving out, customers opting to opt out, customers electing to opt up to Power 100, etc. But where we actually land relative to other CCAs in the state, I do think our participation rates are stellar. And again, I think that's just a testament to the advocacy that all of you are putting in on our behalf and on behalf of customers in our region. So just want to put a vote of thanks to all of you. And again, let's just keep up the momentum. Let's educate all of our neighbors with regards to who Sdcp is, the value that we bring, the superior product that we offer, and obviously the competitive rates that we've been able to carve out for the benefit of all folks in our region. On the right-hand side, what you are seeing here, this is the tracking of our phase 3. So again, this phase 3 is still in flux, right? I mean, we're still enrolling customers and things are constantly in motion. But again, the opt-outs that you see here, these are pretty much in alignment with what we were expecting. And again, the more, sometimes the trend lines typically are when customers get some sort of a notification from the CCAs, you would almost always see the opt-ups or the opt-outs tracking up, right? And a lot of folks actually, one of the biggest opt-out reason that we see, which I'll cover in the next slide, is people just do not like to be automatically enrolled, right? They feel as if they didn't have a say in that process. And so we see opt-outs track higher during mass enrollment when customers are getting their enrollment notices. And then also right after when they receive their first bill and they see that line item referencing CCA charge, it's like, hey, I'm not sure what this is. And so, people opt out then. But again, the participation rates, even for our phase 3, they are stellar. And again, I think that just is reflective of the advocacy that members of the CAC and members of staff and everyone in our region is doing on our behalf. And for that, we just want to say thank you. Moving over to the next slide, please. And this is actually my final slide. So this tracks, what we're capturing from customers as customers are exercising their choice to either stay within our service or elect to opt out of our service. The biggest reason so far tracked is other. And this one here is primarily driven by one multi-regional customer who had over 700 accounts that opted out, even though we did have outreach efforts trying to essentially show them the value of what we offer. They had a corporate policy, unfortunately, that did not allow for them to participate in our service. So that's the reason why you see that opt-out reason as being one of the highest in what we're tracking. And then the next second is what I articulated earlier, which is the dislike of being automatically enrolled. And again, the way that we mitigate this is essentially by just educating our neighbors on who Sdcp is, how Sdcp came about, and the value proposition that we bring. So again, all things considered, kudos to members of the CAC for a job well done within our communities, educating our neighbors, friends, family members on who Sdcp is. And again, our opt-out rates are tracking still within the expected thresholds of 5% or less. And again, as a testament of all the good work that you're putting on our behalf and on behalf of Sdcp. So thank you for that. And with that, that actually concludes my presentation with regards to our efforts pertinent to phase 3. And I'm more than happy to take any questions, comments, or additional feedback. I see quite a few hands raised. So Sebastian, I'm not sure how you, or Chair Price.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lucas. As always, great presentation. Chair Price, not sure if you stepped away.
No, I'm here. I was just on mute and stuff. And I wish, anyhow, the first one I saw was Tom Summers, Anna Webb, and then Victoria. That's the order in which I saw the hands raised. So if we could go in that order and be.
Yeah, Lucas, thank you so much for a stellar presentation. Those numbers, I had a chance to review them when they first hit the agenda. I guess it was the day before yesterday, but noting that Imperial Beach has the lowest participation rate, just by a few hundredths of a percent, but nevertheless the lowest, and the highest excuse or reason for that being folks don't like to have surprises. Is it your opinion that as this service is rolled out to the masses throughout our service area, that the surprise level would be lessened and that the opt-out rate would also be lessened because of that particular reason?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I do think the surprise factor obviously is compounded when customers get their enrollment notice, right? I think generally speaking across all CCAs, we're definitely not an exception here, is that, you know, customers for the most part, they get their mailer, then perhaps they either go to talk to their neighbor, like, hey, you know, what is this? It seems a little bit odd. You know, what is the benefit? You know, and from our perspective, we have seen a lot of customers either on social media, you know, sometimes getting misinformation, right? And so the way, and I think Rita and our external affairs team, they've done a phenomenal job of essentially getting in front of customers and constituents and educating them on what service this is, obviously. And I think once customers know, you know, who we are, what benefits we bring, you know, the superior product that we offer, you know, the competitiveness of our rates, then at that point, you know, you start seeing the element of surprise or the element of mistrust lessen. And obviously then that translates to seeing lower opt-out numbers, which is exactly what we need.
We go back to gallery view.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lucas. Is there any indication that any of those opt-out people have decided to opt back in?
We're actually seeing that. So, you know, customers can re-enroll if and when they get their information, if they get the right information, right?
Yes.
And that is, I think that is where we all come in, right? We have to be out in our communities, which I think you guys are already doing that, and essentially talking to our neighbors, friends, and family on San Diego community power, right? I think usually, and again, I'm not a behavioral scientist, but I think the first inclination when something changes or when somebody perceives a change is it's bad, right? And that is far from the truth. I think what we're all doing here is definitely good and very beneficial to all members of our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anna?
Yes, thank you again, Lucas. This is an excellent report, and actually I'm quite pleased. I expected us to be the lowest. I do want to give a heads up to my other CAC committee members, and I'm going to be quite frank here. Right before the rollout, I happened to catch a post on social media, on the Nextdoor social media, and it was quite disinformational. It was by someone here in the community that was accusing our mayor and our city of making money off of this and shoving this down their throat. And I was able to put on a factual post. I was able to reply factually with exactly what this is, and that as of now, our board members are volunteers. We're all volunteers. That, you know, et cetera, won't go into the details, but I was in close touch with Rita, who's an excellent asset for us and our communities, and she's been wonderful. And so between the two of us, I really feel like we saved, because people started, you know, replying, we're going to opt out, you know. And once they understood, I could see actually some replies from a few people changing. And even the person who posted it thanked me for understanding it better. So I think if you are on social media, if you're on the Nextdoor apps, if you're on, you know, anything within the community, and you have certain community Facebook pages or, you know, things like that, that you could just kind of monitor. And I think that's worthwhile, because disinformation will come out and spread. And frankly, thanks again. I'm very happy with the numbers here. I was worried. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Victoria, Peter, then Tara.
So thank you, Lucas, for giving us all this update. I live in Spring Valley, and I believe you said the county would be able to participate in 2023. I'm asking this for, I guess, like other cities in the county, like Lemon Grove or El Cajon or Santee. Like, how can they opt in to community power, or would it be easier for them to just start in 2023 with the rest of the county?
That's an excellent question, Victoria. Thank you. So it's actually unincorporated areas of the county that are part of our Joint Powers Authority. I personally live in El Cajon, and unfortunately, our city hasn't yet elected to participate in the community choice aggregation framework. But obviously, I mean, that's not to say that, you know, we're not advocating for that to happen. And so, you know, the unincorporated areas of the county of San Diego, that's what I'm referring to when I say that mass enrollment more than likely will take place in Q1 or Q2 of 2023, along with National City. But for those other cities that are interested in participating in, you know, in a community choice aggregation, such as San Diego Community Power or Clean Energy Alliance up north, we definitely encourage constituents, right, to reach out to their elected officials and essentially get those wheels in motion, which is what I personally am doing in El Cajon.
Yeah, and for your edification, Victoria, and maybe you know this or maybe you don't, but there's timing is involved, right? Like this year, if a municipality wants to join, they have to do it before a certain date. And then if that's agreed to, it takes a year. The process takes about a year for them to actually become part of the CCA. So the county and National City right now are in that second part of the process, right? Where you have to wait until the first quarter of 2023 to actually start receiving the benefit because of the process, you know, the energy process with the public utilities and the Energy Commission and all that kind of stuff. So it's you know, you can't just call and say, hey, we want to join. You know, I wish it was that easy, but it's not.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Peter?
Yes, forgive me. I briefly lost my internet connection here at the hotel I'm staying in. So forgive me if you covered this already. But do you have a comprehensive plan involving print media, television, radio, and social media in the when this begins to be rolled out in the larger municipalities? So to give people a heads up so that this is not a surprise?
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for the question. I think we actually have an awesome strategy. And for that, I'll actually pass it over to Rita de la Fuente, our Director of External Affairs, to provide a quick overview.
Perfect.
Hi, Dr. Anderson. Nice to see you again. Depending on when the enrollment is for the unincorporated areas of the county, we'll plan to give everyone a heads up. So for these particular cities, we started paid media 2 weeks prior to the enrollment month, through the enrollment month, and we'll continue 2 weeks after when they're actually receiving their bills. So that's for paid media. As far as outreach goes, we'd like to start sooner than that, months sooner than that. So once we have the date solidified and it's official, I'll be reaching out to you to find out what kind of groups we should target. And as far as social media too, that kind of falls within the scheduling of the paid media.
But I'm also thinking about the Union Tribune and the major television stations, Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS. They might well cover this as a story, say before it hits the city of San Diego, the city of Chula Vista.
Yes, so we got quite a bit of coverage that I can share with you when we kicked off our residential enrollment for all of our founding member agencies, but there will be another big pitch before San Diego and Chula Vista. So far, the media has shown a lot of interest in covering us.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Tara?
Hey there, I have my camera off since my newborn is on me. I was wondering
Okay, let me
if
know.
you know how many have opted up to 100% clean energy?
Yes. So we're tracking the opt-ups, and as of late last week, close to 7% of customers had opted up to Power 100. And again, that actually factors in the fact that, the city of Encinitas, the default there is Power 100.
In what percentage is Encinitas? And is this just the new residential, or is this everyone or all accounts?
So this is all accounts, because for Encinitas, both residential and non-residential customers are automatically defaulted to Power 100.
And okay, thank you. And what percentage is Encinitas? I'm just curious, outside of Encinitas, then how many or what percentages have opted up?
Yeah, so for all of our member city facilities, actually, all of those have opted up. And so that's, when we say 7% of customers have opted up, that includes all member city facilities. So all accounts of City of San Diego, all accounts of City of La Mesa, and all the other member jurisdiction accounts or facilities, those have opted up. And that opt-up took place, I think it was in, I want to say July of last year.
All right, last question. What percentage of Encinitas has opted down?
Only, yeah, that's an excellent question. So it's less than 1%. As of last week, I think only about, I think it was less than 90 customers. Let me see if I can pull that up. But 90 accounts had opted down. But again, I mean, that is one of the options that's available to customers in Encinitas. For those who do not want to be at Power 100, they can simply elect to opt down as opposed to completely opting out. And so far, the counts there have been very small. But I'd be more than glad to send you a quick overview of where the opt downs are pertinent to just the city of Encinitas.
All right, thanks so much, Lucas.
Thank you, Larry.
Yes, I would be interested to see the postcards or the flyers that you send out. So I would like to request, could somebody send those to me so I can be knowledgeable of what it looks like? And I appreciate what you did, you and Rita, in responding to Nextdoor. I have gotten on Nextdoor in the past when I saw stuff was very misinforming people and bulletized my response. I would love to see what the original, I don't know if you took, Anna, if you took any snapshots of how you responded, but it would be interesting to see how you did respond to their misinformation, if that's available. So that's my request.
Say that I did, but I don't know if that's allowed. So does anyone on this meeting know if I'm allowed to share that with Larry or anyone else?
Isn't Nextdoor a public forum?
Well, it is. I did take screenshots.
Okay, thank you. So Larry and Anna, you guys can, I guess you guys can do that. Peter, you still have your hand up. Do you still have another comment or question?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Victoria, you look like you wanted to say something. Did you want to say something? Or you're just waving and happy to be here? Okay.
I'll just second that the same thing happened on our Nextdoor in La Mesa, and I made some comments there, and I think you can always direct them to the website. There's lots of really good information on there, and it does break things down. So just throwing that out.
Well, thank you. Next agenda item. Are we ready to move on? Oh, public comment. I already asked for public comment, right? So Sebastian, you're going to move on to this very exciting stuff here.
Thank you, Chair Price. Really, I am here to assist our Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. Before we do dive in, I do want to mention that we are bringing this item forward because it was included in your fiscal year 2021-2022 work plan. So just want to show that the suggestions that you all put together, for those of you that were part of the ad hoc work plan committee, do come back to the committee. And just to make a quick small plug on that, we will be coming back to the committee next month to select an ad hoc work plan committee for the next fiscal year work plan. So just a quick heads up on that. At this point, I will turn it over to Laura.
Hi, everyone. There's some new faces here since the last time I presented, so I'll introduce myself quickly. I'm Laura Fernandez, the Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs for Sdcp. I know this is a hefty meeting, so thanks so much for sticking with me. I hope you all find this interesting and informative, and I think that this training was suggested maybe last year when I first presented to the CAC, so I'm glad we finally found time to do it. So let's jump right in. Can we move to the next slide, please? And next slide. So I wanted to start off with an introduction of the hierarchy of legal authority in California. As you all know, the California legislature is tasked with passing laws, also referred to as statutes. And then in the energy context, the regulatory agencies like the CPUC and the CEC are tasked with implementing those laws. And usually legislation is sort of painted with kind of a broad brush, and then these agencies are kind of tasked with figuring out the details. So at the CPUC, there's a full set of 5 commissioners, and Sebastian will get into that later. And commissioners vote on commission decisions or resolutions. So those kind of come under the authority of statute. So that's kind of like the next highest level of authority when it comes to legal authority in the areas that we deal with. And those sort of have more value than the individual rulings that you might get from a single administrative law judge, that's ALJ, or a single commissioner. And I'll give you an example in the transportation electrification context. Back in 2016, Commissioner Carla Peterman issued a ruling stating that CCAs were not eligible to file applications for transportation electrification programs. And since then, Southern California Edison has tried to make the argument that the commission has already decided this issue, but the full commission has not ever actually weighed in on the issue. It was just a single commissioner in this one ruling from 6 years ago, so that doesn't carry a whole lot of precedential authority if the commission were to decide they wanted to take up the issue, which they might. And lastly, at the bottom of the pyramid, you see staff guidance. And so we often get guidance from the staff at the CPUC, but any of the authorities above on this slide would sort of take precedent over just staff guidance. So hopefully this visual is helpful as you hear about different things like a CPUC decision or a statute or a ruling. This is kind of how they all fall into order. Next slide, please. So as you all know, we have a bicameral legislature, which means that our legislature is divided into 2 chambers referred to as the Senate and the Assembly. And every California is represented by 1 assembly member and 1 senator. The Assembly has 80 members that are elected to 2-year terms, and the Senate has a membership of 40 senators that are elected for 4-year terms. And we do have term limits in California, and how that works is that any member can serve a maximum of 12 years in either the Senate or the Assembly or some combination of both, but it can't exceed 12 years. Next slide, please. So there's a lot going on this slide, but I think it's really important to understand. And I know it's small type, so I will try and do my best to explain it at a high level. But basically each house has its own process and they kind of mirror each other. But in the beginning of the year, bills are introduced into the different houses. And that's why you'll see Assembly Bill 381 or Senate Bill 881. It's because each house can introduce bills. And that's after they've been prepared by Legislative Council. This year, the bill introduction deadline was February 18th, so no new bills can be introduced now until next year. And then the next step is for bills to get referred to a committee for hearing. And in our case, the bills often get referred to the Utilities and Energy Committee in either the Senate or the Assembly. And this is where people can testify on the bill, and also the public can also weigh in on the bill. So for example, last year we had SB 612, and I know some of you called in and made comments regarding the bill, and we really appreciate that, but that's kind of a good area for participation is when we have those committee hearings. So then the members of the committee will vote on the bill and decide if it gets to move forward in the process. This is kind of like a game board where, you have to get your votes to move along. And some bills require hearings by more than one committee. So bills can get referred, go to a different committee. Bills that have monetary implications might have to go to a fiscal committee. So anyways, if the bill makes it all the way through the necessary committees by the time it has to in one house, then it goes to the next house. So that's called the house of origin. So, a bill that starts off in the assembly would then go to the Senate and vice versa. And all along the way, bills can be amended, sometimes significantly. They can be gutted and amended, which is just like a complete rewrite of the bill. And also bills can get held in committee, and that basically means that they just die and they don't move forward. Next slide, please. So after a bill goes through both houses, then it goes to the governor, who can either sign or veto it. And if the governor vetoes it, then both houses can override the veto with a 2/3 vote from each house. And then if the bill is signed or becomes a law through the veto override process, then generally they go into effect the following January 1st. Next slide, please. So where does Sdcp and all of you come into this? My next presentation is going to be on our draft legislative platform. And the hope is that that document will sort of communicate our policy positions to the public and also enable us to take positions on bills without necessarily requiring board approval in every instance. Of course, the CAC can recommend positions on bills as you've done in the past, and we appreciate that. And I would also ask that you all keep your eyes and ears to the ground for bills that you think might be of interest. We rely a lot on our trade association to identify bills, but in a given year, there's hundreds and hundreds of bills, so it can be a lot to sort through. So don't ever hesitate to reach out if there's a bill you think we should take a closer look at. And of course, we pay attention to bills that Cal CCA takes a position on, and we try to stay in step with them, but it's possible that we will not always agree with positions that Cal CCA might have. And sort of related to this slide, I will just add, we actually just put out an RFP for a lobbyist, so we'll be getting some additional support in this area soon, which is exciting. And if you know anyone who might be interested, the RFP is on our website. Next slide, please. So this is the calendar for the legislative cycle. And as I mentioned, the bill introduction deadline for this year has already passed. And the next kind of big deadline is at the end of May. And that's the deadline for each house to pass bills out of their house of origin. And they have to pass the second house by August 31st. And finally, the governor has to sign or veto bills by September 30th. And that's all I have for the legislative portion. So I'll hand it over to Sebastian, who will cover the regulatory portion.
Thank you very much, Laura. I do see Gary has his hand raised.
Regarding SB 612, it's supposedly a second-year bill, so aren't we in the second year now? Or could you clarify that? Year. Yeah. And it's being a second-year bill seemed to have sort of a the reputation of something that just isn't going to happen. I'm just wondering if SB 612 is going to be possibly better than that.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, I am not sure what's going to happen with SB 612. There's a lot of movement at the legislature right now, a lot of legislators that are leaving, and there's kind of a lot of shuffling around in different leadership positions. And so I think the Cal CCA is sort of still assessing the policy landscape. And so it's not clear whether they think the politics have changed enough from last year to this year such that we could get the bill through this year, but I hope so. So I will keep you all posted on what further action might be needed on SB 612. Thank you for the question.
And thanks for that answer.
You said we were looking for a what for legislation? What's the name of them people?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Eddie?
Yeah, San Diego Community Power is looking for somebody to promote our legislation. What's that?
We are looking for a lobbyist.
Yeah, lobbyist. Okay, that's what it was. Thank you. Yeah,
the RFP is on our website, and proposals are due on April 4th.
And the posting for the RFP is also on our Twitter. and on our LinkedIn pages. So if you have accounts there, feel free to share with your networks. Great. Moving on to the regulatory participation, I will do my best, but Laura, if I miss anything, please do step in. So we have really four main state agencies that we interact with. The first one, in no particular order, is the ISO, the California Independent System Operator. You can think of the ISO as the eyes and ears on the energy that's coming in to the state, out of the state, that's managing the load to make sure that that every LSE load serving entity has enough energy, that there's no blackouts, that no power lines are overloaded, and if there's a wildfire, that it kind of sets up a system of response that they are paying attention to. From there on, we have the California Energy Commission. They are tasked with energy policy planning and planning in general. So any renewable energy goals or stuff that the legislature has passed on, they are in charge of making sure that the state is moving forward in that direction and ensuring that those goals are being passed. From there on, we have our California Public Utilities Commission, the agency that we interact with the most. They are in charge of regulating several utilities beyond energy and electricity. They regulate communications and a few others. And so they are the ones that make sure that any policies and mandates are implemented from the various other agencies. And last but not least, we have the California Air Resources Board, or CARB. They are in charge of making sure that our air is clean, and any mandates from that regard, they have the authority to do so. The California Public Utilities Commission is made up of several commissioners here. We just had a change of seats in several of those. This slide reflects the most recent updates of who makes up these seats. For example, the president of the PUC, Alice Reynolds, just came on the job really since the beginning of the year. Laura, she was the energy advisor to the governor, correct?
That's correct.
Perfect. And they meet every month. The website can be a little bit hard to follow, but if you have any questions, want to participate in any of their meetings, do let us know. One meeting, for example, that we're tracking off is happening next Friday, next Thursday, March 17th, and they'll be voting on a proposed decision on General Order 156, which deals with supplier diversity, one of the many items that we're tracking. So what's within our jurisdiction as a community choice aggregator? We have the authority to set our own procurement, long-term planning, power purchases, our feed-in tariff program, that we have the authority to set that ourselves. SDG&E, for example, or other IOUs, if they want to set those types of generation programs, they need to get approval from the PUC. We have the ability to set our own rates, which all of you are very intimately familiar with. And but the four of you who are very new, we have the ability to set our own rates. We do it in a publicly Brown Act compliant meeting. So we announce that any possible rate changes are happening ahead of time, and we don't need authority and delegation from the PUC in that regard. So on the flip side, what's the jurisdiction of the commission? Really, they have the authority to enforce what some of you are familiar with as the CCA Code of Conduct, where IOUs have to allow CCA activity to occur. if it is voted on by the member jurisdictions. They have the ability to set reasonable rates for safe, reliable, and affordable service. So just making sure that if CCAs set affordable rates, reliable for everybody, we all are very familiar with the exit fees and non-bypassable charges such as wildfire costs, for example. Those are things that they have authority on. Procurement standards. So some of us are very familiar with the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS. They have that authority. And a few others. For this, we can get very wonky real quick, but resource adequacy is basically making sure that there is enough backup generation in case some of the day-to-day generation plants were to go offline. Resource adequacy basically makes it so there's reliability on the grid in case any of those generation services were to turn off. And then among others, access to public purpose program funds. So all of us on our SDG&E bill, we pay a little bit every month into the public purpose program funds. And through that, LSCs, including CCAs, have the ability to apply for funds. Some of them and some we can't, as Laura mentioned, but two examples are energy efficiency programs. For those, we would have to apply through the PUC to access what are called elect to administer and apply to administer funds, as well as our disadvantaged communities green tariff and community solar green tariff programs, which we'll just, for ease of purpose, call it our community solar program that we're working on. The PUC also has authority over smart meter data that they get from the IOUs, and that's something that as CCAs, we work very hard to get increased access to because all of you are our collective customers. And when we have better data, we can make better decisions and create better programs. For this slide, actually, I will turn it to Laura to go over the CPUC process in a nutshell.
Sure, happy to do so. I wish that someone had sat me down and done this with me when I was like an attorney on my first day, because it took me a while to figure this out. So I hope this is helpful to all of you. So basically how the CPUC works is that the legislature will pass a law, and then they will open an application or a rulemaking to address the law. And it's not always related to a law that's passed, but if they can happen that way, and they can open rulemakings or applications for other reasons too. And then once the application or rulemaking is opened, then parties, or sometimes referred to as interveners, have an opportunity to either protest or respond to the application. So that's where SDCP can respond or protest. Responding or protesting to the application then makes you a party to the proceeding. And then there can be replies to those protests and responses. So if one party says something and you want to respond to them, then you have the ability to do so. So then sort of the next step is that usually a commissioner will issue a scoping memo, and that's where they say there are certain issues that are in scope for that proceeding. And because these things can get really, really, really broad, so the scoping memo tends to lay out sort of the schedule and the issues that will be addressed. And then there's another opportunity for comments and reply comments with regard to the scoping memo. And then a lot of times there will be workshops held, and then those are kind of opportunities where you can meet and go over proposals, and people can make comments at the workshops. And so those are fairly common at the CPUC. I'm sure you've all seen those or heard about them, maybe had an opportunity to participate in them. And then next is sort of the fact gathering stage of the proceeding, where it can be very court-like actually. So testimony can be submitted, and it can be written testimony. There can be rebuttal testimonies, also usually written, and then there can actually be hearings, which are It's very much like being in a courtroom setting where you can put a witness up on the stand and you can cross-examine them based on what was said in their written testimony. And so that's where sort of the facts are decided. So the fact-finding mission, we call creating the record upon which the CPUC will eventually base their decision. And then once you have the facts put together, then it's time for parties to write their briefs. And that's where you can make arguments in the briefs and you say, well, I'm looking at, this is the law and these are the facts that have been established in this proceeding. And then you make your arguments in that particular proceeding. For example, we filed a reply brief in the NEM proceeding last year. And then once the briefing stage is done, the commission looks at everything. They look at, the facts, the law, and then they usually come out with a proposed decision. And they say, this is our proposal for how to resolve all of these issues. There's then an opportunity to file opening comments and reply comments on that proposed decisions. Generally, in response to comments, the proposed decision will be revised, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. Sometimes if one commissioner is very unhappy with how the proposed decision came out, then they'll issue an alternate proposed decision. So you guys have heard these terms thrown around a lot in the net energy metering proceeding where we had a proposed decision, we filed comments on it, we're hearing that it's going to be revised. We've also heard there is a potential a commissioner might issue a completely alternate proposed decision. And then finally, it goes to the full commission for a vote. So like we talked about earlier, a full commission decision requires a majority vote from all of the commissioners. And so in the case of having, a proposed decision and an alternate proposed decision, they would vote on which one of those would then become the final decision. And then after the final decision happens, usually there's an implementation after the fact. And a lot of times that's done through an advice letter process. So the final decision might order utilities to file a tier 1 advice letter or tier 2 advice letter doing X, Y, and Z things. And then there's the advice letter process that will help implement the decision. And I'll hand it back to Sebastian. I see Gary has his hand up. Sorry.
Gary.
Actually, can we get the last slide? Thanks. There's the deal on NEM 3 where we thought they're going to issue this terrible final decision, and we were all writing to the governor, and the governor made some noise, I think, about it, and then it seemed like the final decision got, I don't know, taken back. Can you just give us a very brief update on NEM 3 in terms of this particular graph of the process?
Sure, yeah. So where NEM 3 is we had a proposed decision, so step 5, and comments were filed. And at this point, we're waiting for either an alternate proposed decision or for them to put the original proposed decision back on the voting agenda to vote on it for it to then become final. But at this point, all we've seen is the original proposed decision. We haven't seen any revisions to it, and we haven't seen an alternate proposed decision issued. And to be honest, I've never seen something like this at the CPUC before, where they have held a proposed decision indefinitely. So I would like to think that everyone making a lot of noise made a lot of difference, because clearly the commission heard that people are very unhappy about that proposed decision. And so I don't know when we might see an alternate or revised proposed decision, but obviously we're keeping a very close watch on that.
Thanks. Great explanation.
Great question, Gary. So, Larry, do you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. You mentioned that the RFP for that lobbyist was on the website, and I'm trying to get familiar with the website. I don't know anybody who's going to apply, but I don't see where you find that RFP. You point to, I clicked on your choice, billing rates, programs, about resources. I don't see anything that says RFP or.
It's under solicitations. I believe it's
under resources, yeah. So if you
I
go to the top,
emailed it out to the CAC, so check your inbox, Larry.
Yeah, and yeah, on the website it's under resources and under solicitations, and it's called Government Affairs RFP, and also in your inbox. Thank you, Rita.
The solicitations, I would suggest solicitation/RFPs. since you used the term RFP, it would be easier to find that way.
Thank you.
Whoever updates the website. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. So obviously there's a lot of proceedings out there. There's NEM, there's countless others that are of relevance to the operations of the organization. However, at the end of the day, there may be some high priority proceedings that we need to track for the benefit of our longevity. And so here we put 4 proceedings that we're currently tracking and flagging as high priority. One of them deals with, obviously, the PCIA, power charge indifference adjustment. Another one is on the integrated resource plan. So this is on CCAs being responsible for 90% of new procurement between now and 2030. Big deal. Another one is resource adequacy. So as we mentioned, resource adequacy is really backup generation in case mainstream power generation facilities go offline. And particularly as it relates to Sdcp, there's different resource adequacy buckets that we need to meet the requirement of. And one of them is local resource adequacy, or as we call it, local RA. Because we are at the tail end of the state, it is difficult to find local RA resources in the region. And so this is of high priority for us because this is a requirement we need to meet. But unfortunately, the reality is that there aren't enough resources for us to meet this requirement. And so
Sebastian, can you give us an example of an RA?
It's just like a generating facility that generates power, but it's kind of waiting to be turned on in case a power plant fails.
Does battery storage suffice for RA?
Battery storage can suffice. That's correct. And then, Larry, I'll take your question in a minute. Just want to go over the last section. Right now, we're tracking the polar proceeding, or provider of last resort. And this is really on what happens if an IOU were to get out of the generation business. Some of us have heard that SDG&E has spoken about doing this. And so if we were to serve, and really, I'll mention a little bit, but if Laura wants to chime in more, since she's been more in the weeds of this, if SDG&E were to leave the generation business, were we to serve as the polar for other cities that perhaps are not part of SDCP service. And so, Laura, I don't know if you want to mention a little bit more regarding this proceeding.
Sure, yeah, there was a bill a while ago that the CPUC opened a rulemaking in response to. I think it was SB 520. Is that the right number, Sebastian? It doesn't matter. But anyways, as we've all heard, SDG&E has said that they would like to leave the generation business. And we obviously are serving a lot of customers in San Diego. The question remains, if SDG&E did want to get out of generation entirely, what would happen to, as Sebastian stated, what would happen to customers if SDG&E was no longer serving them? And so those are some questions that would obviously need to be addressed before SDG&E could just entirely exit the generation business. And so there's an active rulemaking right now addressing those issues. And there's a lot of related issues regarding financial security requirements, rules around what we call polar service. And so those are some things that we are thinking about. And I see Larry has his hand up if you wanted to jump in.
Yes, going back to RA, resource adequacy, and the question was already asked about battery storage. I know SDG&E has already put some battery storage in place in the San Diego area. And there's a lot of individuals that have battery storage on their homes. New trucks and vehicles like the Ford F-150 is going to have the capability to put energy into a house. as well as Charles House. And who within this org chart that I'm looking at would be involved with energy storage, and could energy storage, these RA, be on the what do you say, the meter side or the home side or the business side, and not on the grid side? General question on.
Yeah, I can jump in really quickly. I think that I don't know like what details are public, but I know that at least some CCAs get some of their resource adequacy through demand response programs. And that is actually something that we are advocating for. There's rules around how much resource adequacy you can get through demand response programs, and we actually have participated in a proceeding to allow more demand response to come from more resource adequacy to come from demand response programs. So for example, Ohm Connect might be one that you've heard of. I know that I'm an SDG&E customer, will be an Sdcp customer soon, but I'm signed up with Ohm Connect. And so there is the ability to rely on some demand response rather than, your traditional peaker plants for resource adequacy. And so I think the answer is both, that there's, front of the meter and behind the meter opportunities for resource adequacy.
And who on the org chart is involved with that kind of work, energy storage side of things?
So procurement would be Byron. He's our director of power services. And so he's more involved in utility scale storage. And then when it comes to regulatory proceedings, you mentioned electric vehicles, and you mentioned the ability of the Ford F-150 to provide power to a home. So that's what we'd call vehicle to grid integration. And that actually is something, that the programs team is looking at. From the regulatory perspective, we actually have a compliance obligation to start reporting on our VGI activities. And so that falls under me. And so it's not just one of us, it's a team effort on all these different areas that you're touching on.
Very good. Okay, thanks for the explanation.
Sure. Back to you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Laura. That really wraps up the presentation. This is here just to incentivize creativity on how can we work together. As Laura mentioned before, we look to you all as our eyes and ears out there in the community. And if there are issues that are of interest to you, Larry, you mentioned the F-150 Lightning. That's a great example for us to be aware of. There are many, many others. Any legislation that you think Sdcp should play a key role in, you will have a voice through us as staff, and also through the directors who appointed you to make a difference. And so this was a placeholder, but really it's to challenge you all to be creative, and if you see something out there, to please let us know. Tom, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Gosh, I learned so much today. I hope I can retain some of it. But one of the local haters was arguing that some of our mainstream power purchase agreements were formerly reserve adequacy for the incumbent utility. And I didn't have any information to counter that argument. Is there any validity to that?
Do you want me to jump in, Sebastian?
Go for it.
Yeah, so so obviously it takes some time to build our own projects. We've obviously already started serving customers, and we've done a lot of contracting for long-term PPAs that are being built now. Our wind project just came online, which is very exciting, but we obviously haven't already built out all capacity to serve all customers immediately. And so we do have to rely somewhat on existing contracts and facilities.
So do you think that contributed to any of the recent price hikes in the cost of energy for incumbent utilities and for ourselves?
The reassignment of contracts, is that your question?
No, like say for instance, entity X was providing RA to SDG&E. This is the alphabet soup. And all of a sudden, they became one of our energy providers. And so that might have contributed to the price hikes.
I don't think so. I don't think there's any validity to that. Energy prices last year just were out of control because of the market, but not, I don't think because of what the situation that you're referring to.
Thanks.
Yeah, if I may just add to Laura's comment, there was a month or two ago, there was some presentation about, actually, I think it was in one of Lucas's presentations about how the energy market had taken a spike, and maybe the biggest reason of all was, a year ago that the Texas grid went down due to that freak winter storm. And it had a long-term ripple effect through the electricity market. But I think it'd be good to have in our hip pocket an explanation of what has happened in the electricity market when we have to argue with naysayers in our communities about somehow Sdcp coming online is causing higher prices.
Yeah.
The ultimate answer is that the market has taken a big jump, and I think I personally could not speak very well to why that has happened. So I think it'd be good for all of us to have that information.
I agree.
Yeah. Sorry.
We're just very excited to provide that to you, and don't want to speak for Rita, but I think we can definitely do that. So thank you, Gary. Alrighty, and Chair Price, that concludes this presentation.
Well, thank you, and thank you, everybody, and thank you to the new members. Welcome to this party. It's going to be a very interesting ride, and we really appreciate, everything that you want to bring to the table. We can have much further conversations. I have 2 minutes to end this meeting on time. So.
Chair Price, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we do have one more item.
Well, what's the bad news?
We have one more item.
Oh, Lord. Okay, the standing item?
No, an actual item.
Okay. I don't see what that is, so why don't you just do it?
Okay. Before pass over the mic back to Laura, do want to mention if any members of the public did want to do public comment for the last item, do please raise your hand. And seeing none, Laura.
I think Anna has her hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just had to let everyone know I'm going to have to jump off here in a minute at 3:30. I've been taking notes, but I'll miss this last section. Rita said she would take notes for me, and I'll put it together with my minutes.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a similar situation. Sorry.
Thank you, Peter.
I warned you guys it was going to be long. All right.
All right, well, for anyone who's missing this presentation, no worries, because my understanding is you have the proposed legislative platform in its entirety in your inbox.
You got 45 seconds, Laura.
All right, I will go quickly. So this is a really robust document, so I thought I would just copy and paste the whole thing into slides. No, I'm just kidding, I didn't do that. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the proposed platform, and if not, I'm happy to take feedback after the meeting. This isn't like your only chance. Feel free to email me. Hopefully you know how to get a hold of me. If you don't, Rita can put you in touch with me. So the idea behind the policy platform is to serve as a guide to our board of directors and staff as we engage in policy matters that are of interest to Sdcp, and having this platform approved by the board, and we're planning to take it to the board this month will ensure that we're able to act quickly on things as they can develop very quickly at the legislature. And we don't always have time to go to the board to get an approve or oppose position on a bill. So sort of having this document approved will let us be a little bit more nimble and act more quickly. So we have 3 major priorities in the platform, which include accelerating deep decarbonization. That includes electrification of buildings in the transportation sector, promoting local development, and stabilizing community choice. Next slide, please. So in addition to the major priorities, we outlined some general legislative principles, and those are kind of the headings of the document if you've looked at it. And I'm just going to go over some of those here because going over all of it would take quite a long time. So Sdcp will support legislation that makes it easier for other cities and counties to form or join a CCA, and will also oppose legislation that limits local decision-making authority for CCAs, like in the rate setting and procurement areas. Next slide, please. When it comes to environmental justice, we will support legislation that enables communities of concern to have affordable, reliable, clean energy, support legislation that strengthens resilience of vulnerable communities and to the impacts of climate change. We'll support legislation that enables all communities to participate in decarbonization efforts, and we'll support legislation that would reduce local air pollution and other negative local impacts that are associated with energy production, and also boost adoption of distributed energy resources within communities of concern. And finally, we'll oppose legislation that have the potential to disproportionately and negatively impact communities of concern. Next slide, please. So for environmental sustainability, we'll support legislation that increases the funding for creation of sustainable and stable energy. We'll support legislation that encourages conservation of energy and development of dynamic load shifting capabilities. And we'll also support legislation for renewable and advanced energy technology that increases efficient consumption. And finally, we'll support legislation and funding for pilot and energy resource efficiency programs. Next slide, please. So for local economic development, we'll support legislation that's consistent with our commitment to an inclusive and sustainable workforce. We'll support legislation that enhances opportunities for CCAs to promote local economic development through locally designed programs. We'll support efforts to enhance local development of regional sources of renewable energy, and also legislation that enables CCAs to collaborate with their member jurisdictions on local energy and resources and projects that advance environmental objectives. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. So for educational, neighborhood, and social services, Sdcp will support legislation that aids or helps fund us to, or funds Sdcp to provide energy support services and opportunities for reducing energy costs for people who are low income, senior, veterans, and people with disabilities. And finally, we'll support legislation and initiatives that increase funding for energy efficiency and demand response, solar and storage, TE, and energy literacy services. So sorry, not 2 minutes, but pretty quick. So that's kind of an overview of a lot of what is in our legislative policy platform. I would love if you could all read it. Let me know if you have feedback, if there's things that you'd like to see changed before we take it to the board, because it will get approved and then we will act on legislation accordingly to this platform. So any questions, comments?
I don't see any hands raised. Is there any comments from the public? I don't see any there neither.
Yeah, I don't see any, Chair Price.
Okay, and with that, can I close the meeting now, Sebastian?
We technically have the standing item, which we can conclude at your discretion. But beyond that, we are at the end of the meeting.
Okay, are there any potential items for Board of Directors from the committee? I guess not. Are there any committee member announcements? Would anybody on the committee like to announce anything, especially to our new members? Do you have anything to announce?
If I can just chime in, I'll be very brief. As a rep in National City, I've been working on a lot of fun projects with our lowrider community. So I look forward to educating members of our coalition about what we're working on here. So I'm looking forward to connecting all members of our communities to take part in this. So thank you. We have a lot of events coming up this year.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Gary. I just want to announce two things. Rita and Cody are giving a presentation to the Encinitas City Council at the meeting next Wednesday night. And also, I would like to think that I helped organize a sort of a video presentation of, the informational presentation for the residential rollout with Sierra Club. And that will be taking place as a Zoom meeting on Thursday night.
Thank you. Larry, you have your hand up. And then Victoria. Oh, Victoria, Larry put his hand down.
Okay. Hello, I'm Victoria. I live in Spring Valley. I founded a group called the Spring Valley Cleanup Crew. We're going to be hosting an Earth Day event at Lamar County Park on April 23rd. It's completely community funded. So if anyone would be willing to donate like LED light bulbs, reusable water bottles, gardening equipment, native seeds, or anything else that you feel would be sustainable, that would be much appreciated. I live in an environmental justice community, but I feel it would be very rude and wrong for me to tell members of my community that they need to make different choices when those choices might be not the most accessible. So if you're able to come and help volunteer, we're also going to be planting trees at the park, but it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, give me a call or shoot me an email, Victoria. We can have a conversation about all that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Chair Price, just want to mention that I will be following up this afternoon or on Monday with an updated contact list for everybody.
Okay.
So you have the contact information for the new CAC members. And also want to thank you all for staying long. I did give you a fair warning though, so no surprises here.
Thank you, Sebastian. We appreciate you too. Now, can I close the meeting, sir?
You can close the meeting.
Without any further ado, this meeting is adjourned. Have a beautiful weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Welcome new members.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good job, Eddie. See ya.
You.